story. In the summer of 2019, lightning struck my classroom at the school where I was teaching at the time. I did not know this had happened, and even if I had known, I would have thought really nothing of it. About 2 weeks before the 2019-2020 school year started, I went to my room 13, to get my classroom set up for students. And I always get kind of choked up when I talk about this because I didn't realize then, and no one realized then, that would be the last time I would be in my room that way, preparing for students' arrival. And it's so weird to think about how you can be in something really banal and you don't know how much you love it until the experience is permanently removed. I'm a crier. If you're going to listen to this podcast, you're going to have to accept a little bit of emotionality, because I'm an emotional kind of girl. Deal with it. I'm learning how myself. So I was in my classroom getting my room set up, and my friend Betsy, who is this extraordinary musician, writer, dancer. I don't even know what to describe what she is. She's just a force of nature and freaking genius, and I love her to the moon and back. But I met Betsy up at the school on the mountain, and that day as I was setting up my things in room 13 for the arrival of the students for the 2019-2020 school year, she came into my room, but she wasn't really in my room. It was like she was hesitant to come in my room, so she was standing in that little, what do you call it, portico at threshold of my classroom by the door frame. And she was eating tuna or chicken straight out of the can with a fork. And I remember this because I always loved that about Betsy, how she just is who she is. And if she needs some chicken out of a can, she's going to eat that chicken out of a can. She doesn't give a fuck who sees her eating chicken out of a can. And I love people like that. So I remember the chicken in the can. I think it was chicken. Maybe it was tuna. And she comes in, she has this sort of wild look in her eyes, and she said, "Did you hear what happened?" And the way she was talking, I thought, and like the way she was looking around my room from a distance, I thought maybe, I don't know, a murder had taken place. It was something bad, I could just tell. And I said I didn't know what happened, and she told me lightning had struck the school a few weeks prior. And I said, oh, because I'm from Chicago, and in the Midwest, lightning is striking shit all the time, and we never talk about it, so it's sort of a random thing to bring up, unless, I was kind of anticipating next she was going to tell me, and therefore, all the computers are fried or something. I was waiting for the end next. And the end next that she gave me was, the lightning struck your room specifically. This electric box that was outside of room 13, specifically. I was like, oh, fuck, that's crazy. Because again, from the Midwest, lightning strikes. It's just a thing that happens. And then Betsy said that in the Navajo belief system, lightning striking a building, a place, is usually a bad omen. And living in Flagstaff, we were living on occupied Navajo lands. We had a number of indigenous students. And so the school hired a medicine man to come out and help the school purge some of the wickedness that might be left over from the lightning strike. I'm paraphrasing. I don't fully understand the belief system myself. I'm still learning. And she said, because it struck your room specifically, you should go drink some of this water that the medicine man left with the executive director. And this is where my cynical mind rose up, and I thought, no. And I said to Betsy, I'll think about it. But I wasn't going to go out of my way to drink some weird water. And it wasn't my belief system. And this was 2019, and I was a different version of myself in 2019. 2022 me would have said, yes, let me put down this stack of books and I will follow you to the front office refrigerator or wherever the Medicine Man water is and I'll drink it. But I didn't do that. I said, okay. And Betsy, I don't think she ever entered my room because it's a cursed place. I didn't make much of it. And I was driving home that day from work and I pulled over the side of the road because I was going to text the executive director, my boss, and see if he had any of that Medicine Man water because I thought maybe I could turn around and go back to the school and get it. And my now ex-wife was very, she didn't think that it was a necessary thing for me to do either. And so I didn't drink the water. I drove home, put on my pajamas, and I drank. And I didn't drink the water because I was so arrogant as to not understand that maybe the Navajo people who have lived on the land up there in Flagstaff for thousands of years might know something about that land and about what happens to that land under certain natural forces that I simply don't know and can never know. But I wasn't open to that then. That was 2019. And of course, we all know how the 2019-2020 school year went, but let me tell you a little bit about how it went for me specifically. In November of 2019, I found a mass on my chest wall, and after 3 months of begging and pleading to get correct radiology reports and correct scans and biopsies, I finally got an email. It was in my patient portal. It wasn't really an email. It wasn't like a Gmail, but it was in my patient portal telling me that I had breast cancer again. So that was fun. I didn't know breast cancer could come back in my back. All you ladies out there, check your backs. So that happened, and then it was, by the time I got properly scanned and all that shit, it was metastatic. It was stage 4. It spread to parts of my bones. And so I'm a permanent cancer patient. I'm living with metastatic breast cancer. I'm not dying of it yet. Probably will die of it someday. But right now I'm living with it. So that happened in the 2019-2020 school year. And then a week after I was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer, my dog Bernie died in my lap suddenly after eating a piece of popcorn. And then the school shut down. And teaching and writing have been the two things in my life that have brought me the greatest joy. And I'm grateful that I can still write, and I've been able to write throughout the last 2 years. But I can't help but wonder what things had looked like had I made a different choice after the lightning strike. I am currently sitting in my 5th hotel room of this week because I am persona non grata in my home after my soon-to-be ex filed for divorce after an argument on a Sunday afternoon. Not a violent argument. We never had those. Not a throwing. We never argued like that. We just argued with words, and it ended not with a bang, but with a text, a couple of texts, and so my whole life that I spent the last 8 years building is over. And that's okay. But I can't help but wonder what would have happened if I had just sucked it up and drank the fucking water. I had no idea after that lightning strike how crazy my life was going to get. And maybe there's no corollary. Maybe it's like the Tucson Botanical Gardens. My friend Mike and I paid a visit to the Tucson Botanical Gardens several weeks ago. I had no idea that my wife was about to leave me. No holy fucking clue. And we went to the Botanic Gardens, and we got there late. It was about an hour to close. And we asked the young woman who was working the front desk of the Botanic Gardens, who was reading, I was going to say Saul Alinsky. That's not who she was reading. Ray Bradbury. She was reading Ray Bradbury for Fahrenheit 451, so I'm guessing she's probably a U of A student. I'm not trying to put her on blast. It's just a thing that happened. So Mike and I get there, and the fee is like $15. Not, big deal, but, $15. And so Mike asked her, do you think it'd be worth it for us to pay the admission, given that there's only an hour left? We'll be able to see anything. And she said, yes, I think so. And the butterfly exhibit is also included in your fee. And Mike and I looked at each other, and it was a Saturday or Sunday, and we thought, shit, hell yeah, let's do it. Butterflies. Mike and I, when we get together, sometimes we do this thing we call the river, and it's just where we meet at a certain spot, and then we just let the day unfold as it wishes. So one time we found ourselves in a parking lot outside of a monastery, yelling to the sky, God, tell us what to do with our day. This was that day, and God took us to the Botanic Garden. So the young woman told us that it was worth it because for $15 we could at least see some stuff in the Botanic Gardens, and that we could also get into the butterfly exhibit for free, included in our fee. So we kind of beeline to the butterfly exhibit. That's a weird statement. Beeline to the butterfly exhibit. We beeline over there, and it's closed. It closed at 3:30 when she sold us our admission. So we laughed about this because we are good at laughing about things that are truly horrific. Most of my friends are good at laughing at things that are truly horrific, and that's why they're my friends, because if it was not for laughter, I probably would have put a bullet in my head, I don't know, 3 weeks ago when my marriage suddenly ended and there were lawyers suddenly calling me and shit. But because of laughter and some other tools I have that I hope to share with you, I don't wish to put a bullet in my head right now because, yeah, it'll be okay. So on our way out of the Botanic Gardens, Mike and I saw the girl packing up her Ray Bradbury, and Mike said, should we say something to her? And I said, I don't think so. Let's just let it go. Fuck it. I didn't want to get into a thing at 4:30 in the afternoon at the Tucson Botanic Gardens with some college kid. But Mike and I are teachers, and she was a young person. And, you really shouldn't tell the customer that the butterfly exhibit is open and free if it's not actually open. So Mike approached the girl, the young woman. I tried to disabuse myself of calling women girls. I call myself a girl, though. It's not an insult. It's just the way I speak, and I'm not going to apologize too much for it. I've been a good feminist all my life. That has not changed. Mike said to the young woman, excuse me, and she turned around. She just had daggers in her eyes. Like she was already pissed just because he had paused her on her way back to her car or whatever. And I get it. Like, end of the day, in the pandemic at work, you just want to get the fuck into your home. And she turned and she said, yes. And Mike said, you sold us our admission tickets. And she said, yes. And he said, and you told us the butterfly exhibit was included. And she said, it is. And Mike said, but when you sold us the ticket, the butterfly exhibit was closed. And she said, yes. And at this point, I'm backing away because this chick she's on. She's not taking any bullshit. And it wasn't bullshit. It was just, letting her know that you shouldn't tell people that they're buying tickets to a butterfly exhibit when the butterfly exhibit is closed. So he said, you said it was free. And she said, it is free. And he said, but we bought the tickets and then it was closed. And she said, I don't see the correlation. And at this point, Mike abandoned the conversation because he was laughing and I was laughing because we were both so aghast. Like, she didn't understand the correlation between selling us a ticket for an exhibit and the exhibit not being open. She did not see the correlation. Why am I bringing this up? Because I'm talking about the lightning strike. And I don't know if there's a correlation between my not drinking the water after the lightning strike and all of the things that have happened that are just, they almost feel unfucking imaginable. Like, if someone had come to me in 2019 and told me, Gruber, in the next 2 years, you'll be re-diagnosed with cancer, this time it'll be stage 4. There's no stage 5. You will lose your dog, who is only 8. You will, for all intents and purposes, lose your job because the whole way of your career working has changed. Your profession as you knew it no longer exists, and that is true for so many of us who've been in the teaching profession for many years like I have. It's not there anymore. It's gone, at least in the public education sphere. And I don't think I'm up to the task anymore, quite frankly. And I certainly didn't think my wife would leave me. We had not been getting along, so it's not like, everything was great and then she just left, but we'd gone out to dinner together on Friday with one of my former students, the Friday before she left me. I will be fucking with this one forever. But is it correlated in any way to the lightning strike? I think no. I think I paid off my lightning strike fees in the 2019-2020 year/school year. And then some more in 2021. And now some more in 2022. And it looks like my life is in ashes right now. Kind of. And I'm trying to stay positive. And so I'm making this podcast because it's something for me to do with the loneliest hours of my day, which is really any hour after about 5 p.m. on. I hate nighttime. I really struggle with it. And so I'm doing this mostly for me, but if you want to listen and you take something away from what I'm banging on about, then I think that's great. I want you to know something important. You will hear me snarfling and sniffling. It's either because I'm crying or I have allergies. I do not have COVID right now. I hope to keep it that way. I am not sick. I hope to keep that way. I feel good in my body. I feel tired, really tired, but that's understandable given the fact that I've been living out of hotels for the past 2 weeks and I'm in the process of moving my entire life back to Chicago. I'll say more about that later. I don't want to say much about that right now. I just want to clarify that for today, I'll try to minimize the sniffles. But if you hear congestion, if you hear sniffles, it's either allergies or sadness. Maybe both at the same time. Who fucking knows? So what is this stupid podcast about? It isn't even a podcast. As I've tried to record this, I slip into thinking I'm on WGN radio, and I start saying things like, for those just tuning in, you're not going to be just fucking tuning into a YouTube video. It's not exactly a podcast. It's a visual essay podcast / I don't know. The idea I had was to call this series What Ails Ya? Because I've spent the last year, specifically, the last 12 months, specifically, thinking a lot about what ails me and what of that I can heal, what of that I can make easier to contend with, and how I can take the things that ail me that are immaterial, sadness, depression, anxiety, frustration, resentment, regret, and turn them into art, specifically for me, writing. And I want to share some of what I've learned in this past year. And you may be thinking, what in the fuck do I have to learn from a woman who has stage 4 cancer and is living in a hotel by the expressway in Tucson? That's a very good question. What I can tell you is this. I have had 45 years of human experience. Some of it's been absolutely normal and as expected, but much of it has been very strange. Not bad strange, not good strange. Sometimes good strange, sometimes bad strange, but sometimes just ordinary strange. And as I end this chapter of my life, my marriage, my residency in Arizona, and start a new chapter of my life, I hope to take some of the tools I've learned in the past year specifically, and I'll say more about this specific past 12 months in a moment, and share them with others, because that's what I like to do with my knowledge. I like to share it. That's what drew me into teaching in the first place. I've been teaching for 20 some odd years. I plan to continue in some capacity because I do have a Jones for teaching, and while these days I question anything I have a Jones for, teaching's a healthy Jones, and that's the thing about life. We have Jones for different things. Some of that's a good Jones, some of that's bad Jones. Sometimes Jones is just ambition, motivation, love. Sometimes a Jones is addiction, corrosiveness, shitty behavior. And so I want to see what good that I've learned this past year, and maybe these past 7 years in Arizona, that I can use in rebuilding my life and in protecting and enhancing my creative health. And maybe along the way, if not just some funny, weird stories, you'll get something out of this endeavor too. I drank heavily for a little over a quarter of a century. In retrospect, by the time I was out of high school, I was already an alcoholic. At least I was behaving alcoholically. Like any disease, alcoholism progresses over time. So by the time I quit drinking, I had reached a bottom. What that bottom looked like specifically was falling on cancer medications after drinking on cancer medications that specifically said on the label, do not drink on these cancer medications. But I was drunk, so I drank anyway, because that's what I did. So I did with my evenings. So I got through them, really. It was my primary coping mechanism for really heavy stuff in life. And by the time I was in my mid-40s, early 40s, still drinking like a lunatic, I felt a lot of shame around that, and I didn't want to talk about it. I didn't want to confess it. I kept it a big fucking secret. And there's a saying in this super secret recovery program that I sometimes attend meetings of, that we're only as sick as our secrets. And I do believe that now. I really do believe that. I never really liked secrets. Still don't like secrets. And I have very few of them now as an individual. As a writer, I'm a memoirist principally, so I use my life for writing material. Think of that what you will. I try to behave ethically. I try not to hurt anyone in my literary pursuits. But as Anne Lamott said, your story is your story. And if they wanted to be portrayed better, they should have treated you better. She said something much more eloquent, I'm sure, but that sentiment I would like to credit to Anne Lamott. So I drank on medications that I was not supposed to drink on. And I fell, and I detached my left retina and busted my head open. I had the retina repaired by a wonderful surgeon here in Tucson with very dainty, smooth, tiny hands, which is what you want in an eyeball surgeon. And I got my ass into AA. And this is not an AA podcast. I am in no way speaking for, about, a representative. I'm not. It's a tool I have used to cease drinking. And I have succeeded in ceasing drinking. So I had my eyeball fixed, but I did not have the gash on my forehead fixed, and I'm glad, because it is a daily reminder of where I've been and where I'm going. And even when things feel like shit, particularly this week when I am ostensibly homeless, waiting out the days, trying to pack all of my shit, trying to migrate all of my shit to Chicago for my flight, which leaves next week, where I will rebuild my life again. When things feel like shit, I know I can rebuild because I've done it before. And now I'm coming back to Chicago to rebuild again, but I'm coming back with a new set of tools. You can drink a beer and listen to this podcast. I really don't mind. If other people drink, I just don't drink anymore because the universe made it quite clear to me on March 5th, 2021, that if I continued to abuse that substance, I would die. And I don't want to die. Most of my life is about how do I live, and I'm really trying as I go forward to this known and unknown to keep my wits about me, to make healthy, sane, rational decisions, even though to some, maybe, flying back home to Chicago to rebuild my life in my home of origin might not necessarily seem totally sane to some listeners. It's sane to me, it makes sense to me. It's not going to be comfortable, it's not going to be easy. There's going to be a lot of culture shock, there's going to be a lot of readjusting, there's going to be a lot of stress. I don't have any illusions about that. But I think if I am in the company of other people, if I have my connections, I can get through it. I know I can. Period. I mean, I either get through it or I die. Either way, I get through it, I think. I really have no thoughts on the afterlife, so this would be a great time for, ghost listeners to add some comments to this video and tell us what the great beyond looks like, because I have no fucking clue. I don't even pretend to have a clue. As I previously stated, I think I'm not a Christian, I'm not a Muslim, I'm not a Jew, I try to be a good Buddhist, but we don't really have a God at the center of our practice, which is one of the things that makes Buddhism super appealing to me. So anyway, I'm an ex-drunk, and the reason I quit drinking, aside from not being able to stop my own drinking, it's weird. I never got into gambling or pills, and I was always too lazy for street drugs because it meant like going out and finding the drugs. I just want to go to a Walgreens if I'm getting drugs, or the liquor store. And even when I was a teenager, back when like you had to buy weed from the crack dealer who was friends with your weird brother, even then I would let my friends do that handoff dirty work because I didn't want any part of the grossness, even though it was totally part of the grossness, just by way of giving the crack dealer who sold weed my money. That was Chicago in the 90s, folks. We didn't have legal weed back then. We were teenagers. We needed some weed, so we did what we had to do. What I'm saying is alcohol was so easy, and I think the ease of access was bad for me. I know it was bad for me because if I had to work to get liquor, and I'm not advocating prohibition here, again, hats off to you if you can drink like a normal person. I cannot. If I have one drink, it's not going to be one drink. It's going to be like 9. And I'm going to pass out because what's the point of drinking if you can't pass out? I love drinking because I love to be able to fall asleep so easily or pass out. I remember when I was early in my, first 3 months of being sober from alcohol, sleep, and it's still really hard for me because I don't drink, but it's a little easier when things are normal, and things are not normal now, so sleep is not normal now, and I've just accepted that. But I remember in those first few months not drinking that that sensation of, I'd forgotten what it was like to fall asleep because so many nights of my life I passed out. And that's a very different thing. It's like the difference between taking a nap and being anesthetized for surgery. Though I understand why Michael Jackson got that propofol doctor. I mean, for those of us who struggle with insomnia, and this is not in support of Michael Jackson or against Michael Jackson was a weirdo. Can we just admit that, please? Great musician, talented as all fuck in his field, made some great albums, but fucking weird guy. Probably a bad guy. Mostly bad. Nobody's entirely bad. That's something I've come to believe. Um, but I get why he got that propofol doctor, because shit, it is terrible to not be able to sleep, especially when you got stuff to do the next day. And these last couple of weeks have been, oh, they have tested my recovery from alcoholism like none other. I've not picked up a drink in about 20 days, 25 days. I'll have been 1 year off the sauce. Intend to keep it that way. 'Cause again, for me, it's life or death. It's not like, oh, when I drink, I go out and sleep around. Again, remember, I'm lazy. When I drink, I stay home, listen to tunes, maybe call you up on the telephone to have a conversation with you until I feel I'm getting too drunk, at which point I will end the conversation so I can continue to get more drunk. That was me when I was drinking. When I was younger and had more energy, I would make horrible mistakes. Things that I'm still ashamed of to this day transpired as a result of my alcoholic behavior. But in the end, it was just life or death. It was just a simple choice. Do you want to live? Do you want to die? Live and not drink, die and continue drinking. Well, I chose live and not drink. It has not been the easiest choice. Isn't that Robert Frost poem, Mike Levin? Mike Levin and I hate Robert Frost. We don't hate him, but we have this inside joke about how terrible it is. His poetry is so old and so boring, and why are we still teaching him in schools? I mean, if you're getting an English degree, by all means, read your Robert Frost and learn about American literature and its weird fluctuations. But he sucks. He's not good anymore. That's what Mike and I feel. And if you feel differently, I'm really, really sorry. I'm no offense. You can love Robert Frost and beer, but Mike and I have this kind of inside joke about, remember when Robert Frost bombed the Kennedy inauguration? Because Robert Frost spoke, he read a poem at the Kennedy inauguration, and he was so old and he was so boring, and it just look it up on YouTube. It's depressing. He bombed. He was no Amanda Gorman. I'll tell you that. It was no Amanda Gorman. So I didn't want to die. So I quit drinking. And I was born in 1976. AA, I think, was started in the 50s. And so I knew of its existence, and I'll talk more about that in future episodes. But it was a lifeline for me. I will never speak ill of that program. I still use that program, especially when it's really hard for me to stay away from alcohol. And there are times when it's really hard for me to stay away from alcohol. But I'm doing it, folks. I'm fucking doing it. One day at a time. One day at a time. I hate all those little folksy isms that come with support groups. I really do. It's not even it's not an AA thing. It's that Alison Gruber doesn't like support groups, just like she doesn't really like parades, and will never, ever again eat a lima bean in her life. So it's like, I just don't like support groups. That's my thing. I don't like rules. That's been a problem for me. It's one of my character defects. I don't like rules. I think most rules are fucking stupid. And I also think I'm usually right about that. Maybe that's also a character defect. I don't know. But I had to quit drinking because it was life or death. I did all this shit with me and all these meds because I'm a cancer patient, so I've always got to carry like tons of fucking, oh my God, this is craziness now. How did I get here? I know how I got here because I got here by way of coming back to myself. And the first step I took in coming back to myself was eliminating the behavior of consuming any alcohol. As I said, Some people can have a drink or two and no big deal. I've actually seen that happen with my own eyes, and I've always been astonished when people can have one or two drinks, and then I assume they just go home and go to bed, but maybe they don't. Maybe they do what I used to do. I'd go out and have one or two drinks because I don't want to get sloshed, around people, and then I'd come home and have many more drinks. So I stopped. I chose life over death. I said that Buddhism appeals to me in part because it doesn't have a God at its center. And it's really more complicated than that. You know, I guess the closest the Buddhists have is the Om, sort of universal love, universal caring, universal compassion and understanding. I know I'm misrepresenting Buddhism. I misrepresent many things constantly, so don't take anything I say on this podcast seriously. Unless you're in a classroom with me where I'm getting paid to teach you shit, I guarantee nothing of great accuracy in this hybrid podcast thing that I'm doing here. So Buddhists don't really have God in the sense of like a man on a cloud in the sky with a beard. The Western ideas of God is the great patriarch. Barf, gag me with a spoon, please. No, I want nothing to do with it anymore. If you have something to do with it, I do not mean to offend you. It might be great for you. I think God is a deeply personal thing, and I think God should be a deeply personal thing. But I don't like the versions of God that I learned about when I was a little baby kid growing up in the Catholic Church of the 1980s. Did not like that. I'll talk about that more in another episode. So I like what the Buddhists have to say most of the time, a lot. And when I got into recovery from my drinking problem, I was told that I really needed a spiritual foundation to get through this. And I was skeptical. I knew there were atheists in AA. I always called myself an agnostic, so I always wanted to leave the door open a little, leave the door ajar so that at the end of my days I could be like, sorry, God, I didn't really mean it. I was an agnostic. I never renounced you. I used to call myself an agnostic, and I think really I was an atheist. I really didn't believe in God. I mean, it was like every time I'd talk about God with someone else, I felt like I was humoring that person. I was just talking about God to make them feel better about what they believed, even though deep down I was like, oh God, it's like we're talking about like some imaginary fucking Pete's dragon. And so I was a little hesitant to do the whole spiritual practice thing. And I didn't really get it. Like people would say, get on your knees and pray. And sometimes I did do that in the early days of my recovery from alcoholism. I'm drinking decaf coffee. God, I am so divorced. I'm drinking decaf coffee in a motel room with like a quarter of my belongings on the bed around me. Really, I don't own much, folks. That's great, actually. If you do want to try divorce, I don't recommend it, but if you do want to try divorce, my advice to you would be in the course of the marriage, try to accumulate as little as possible, just survive. Because in the end, there ain't nothing they can take from you. And so that's one less thing you have to be afraid of as you contemplate the gaping maw of the rest of your life. So Buddhism doesn't have God. But I say God and I talk about God because in the course of trying to establish a spiritual practice, I return to the part of myself that I was before the Catholics did a number on me. I'm sorry. Catholics, I know some wonderful Catholics, and I just, yeah, I'm working on that. So I did what I could, and I'm fortunate that I got to get sober early in the American Southwest at a time of the year when it is so beautiful. It is so beautiful right now. It's going to be so hard to leave next week to go to this cold Nordic Chicago weather after it's so gorgeous here. But Um, I got to get sober early in in Tucson, and so I would spend a lot of time meditating in the sunshine in our yard. And I would spend time meditating on walks with the dog, and I would spend time meditating in the shower. I can't really, and I'm hoping to change this when I move into my new place in the Chicagoland area. I can't really get good about making time for just meditation. It's like I'm always meditation and a walk, meditation and outside, meditation and shower, because I struggle with being still. I really do. I think that's part of the ADD that my psychiatrists are currently sicking Columbo on. I don't know what that means, and I don't know why I'm thinking of Columbo right now. I'm just thinking of trying to solve a case, or trying to solve whether or not I have ADD or just horrific PTSD, or maybe a little bit of both. I think it's a little bit of both, but I'm not a doctor. And in the process of those early days of recovery from alcoholism and trying to braid in spiritual practices, I returned to some of the things I was taught by my friend Lynn, who is a practicing, I think, Buddhist still, um, which was bead meditation. So I started beading out. Like I bought beads. I wear every day a set of wooden neck beads. I started making my own bead, not making the beads, but making malas. I taught a whole class to kids on malas and mandalas, and we had so much fun. And in the process of that, and then sharing it with my students, I felt the presence of God. Not Skybeard Man God, not the God that I knew in Catholic school, but a compassionate, loving force that wants me to be okay and will protect me. And it's not a man or a woman. It doesn't even, we don't understand God's laws, and God is usually just puzzled or doesn't have any opinion whatsoever on our laws. I don't even think God, of my understanding, has any opinions on human matters. God just is. God just is. And you either get that or you don't. And so when I say God, I don't mean to evoke in your mind a deity or there's no reward from my God other than this beautiful life I've been given. The things that I live inside and that I carry inside of me are part of God. Does that make any sense? Well, you keep listening to me long enough and it'll start to make sense. And then you'll start to think you're crazy because I'm making sense. But I say God not because I mean what people usually mean when they say God, but because I know if I say God to another human being, that they basically understand what I'm talking about. And if they are agnostic or atheist, as I used to be, they think, oh, bless your heart, you still believe in God. But they don't know. Because I don't believe in like some like reward system that comes from God. Like God's not gonna fucking, put me on a cloud with the angels and I don't know, Aristotle, whoever you think you're gonna meet in heaven. I don't fucking know. There's been books written about this, but that's not what my God is. My understanding of God is not all about that. It's not all about that. It's about love. It's about compassion. It's about truth. It's about beauty. My God is soft. Some of your gods are quite, or your understanding of gods are quite harsh. My God is soft. So I came to God, and maybe in another episode I'll talk about specific moments of God, but I just want you to trust me when I say I had true, deep spiritual experiences. I mean, wasn't like miracles. My God doesn't operate from that framework. I mean, there's miracles every day if you understand miracles as I understand miracles. So I say God because you will understand what I mean, basically, or you will think I'm a total fucking idiot, basically. And either way, that's not of any concern to me because I know what I know. So I'm sitting here in this hotel by the highway, and I'm thinking about meditation, and I'm thinking about God, and I'm thinking about what ails me. And when I talk about what ails me, I'm really talking about the immaterial things that ail me. Because the material things that ail me, money, cancer, divorce, those things I have some control over, but they're not really within the realm of the spiritual. And what's really helped me since I've gotten clean from alcohol is having this fairly abundant spiritual life. It's been a gift. And I have a lot of organizations and institutions and individuals to thank for that. Some of them children who didn't even know that they were giving me this gift, but they gave it to me. And so I'm not an expert in life. I'm not an expert in meditation. I'm not an expert in, getting closer to God. I just know what I've done in that I don't feel, even in the most cataclysmic situations, and this, my friends, that what I'm living in is a cataclysmic situation. And I feel terrible sometimes. I feel rageful sometimes. I feel so despairingly sad sometimes. I feel confused and disordered and all of that, but I also sometimes feel great hope, great clarity. I also feel I get signs from God. Not, you know what I'm talking about. God is an energy. How about that? How about that? My understanding of God is an energy. So when I say I get signs from God, I don't want you to think that, like Joseph Smith, I'm like sitting here in this fucking comfort inn reading off golden plates, making shit up. I want no business with organized religions, except for maybe the Buddhists, if they'll ever have me. And I say that like I've applied and they've rejected. I probably am a Buddhist. I don't know why I don't just call myself that. Or I try. But isn't that what everyone does? Like you try to be a good Catholic, you try to be a good Jew, you try to be a good Muslim, you try to be this, you try to be that. We're never fucking perfect. I used to bang on about that all the time with my students in literature courses when they would, and they often would because younger folks do get a little bent about the fact that I was teaching authors who'd done some terrible thing as it related to culture and custom in the 21st century. And I would push back on that sometimes and say, wait a second, this is still good art, even though this person may have held some convictions that are unfortunate. And the question I always ask them to ask themselves before they quote unquote canceled any art was, okay, the person's awful, but does the work that the person produced make you complicit in their awfulness? Ezra Pound makes me complicit in his awfulness. So I don't teach Ezra Pound and I don't read him, and I occasionally bring him up because I really geek out on World War I era literature and the whole lit scene and the Bloomsbury crowd and what was going on in America at that time in terms of poetry and prose. And I'll reference him, but I'm not going to teach him, I'm not going to read him. Woody Allen. Oh, fuck, I will never watch another Woody Allen movie because his grossness is all over it. T.S. Eliot is an asshole. He was an asshole. I'm sure there were lots of people, most people probably, who knew him thought he was an asshole. If I'm wrong, I stand corrected. I apologize, but I'm just guessing people thought he was an ass because he seems like a real asshole to me. Horrible man. Left his fucking wife. I shouldn't even be talking about this shit right now. That was never the point that I used to make the case for T.S. Eliot being a horrible man. I would never be like, he left his wife. Because until I got married, I was like, fuck marriage. And then once I got married, I was like, please never divorce me. And I actually have nightmares about that. And I'd wake up and like, yeah, I'm living in a nightmare. Like, this is what I feared most could ever happen. After all that's happened, I feared this, and I'm getting through it. So what I'm trying to say is I'm against canceling art because the artist was imperfect, because I am imperfect and I would never want my art canceled. You are imperfect. I would never want your work canceled. No, I mean, if you're going around straight up being a racist, sexist, classist, homophobic, transphobic dickhead, oh, yeah, I'm going to call you out on that shit. My whole second episode is going to be about judgment. And so I'm not going to elaborate on that. But the truth is we're all suffering. Our suffering might be quite different from the suffering of our ancestors. It might be less or easier. I don't even think we can equivocate, though. I was tired of it before it was even a trend, but there were people early in the pandemic who would say, when I would say to my seniors who weren't getting their prom that they had, always dreamt of, or their graduation ceremony that they had been looking forward to, for the last 4 years, my seniors who weren't able to hang out with their friends their senior year, when I was saying to them early in the pandemic, I'm so sorry, this is like the worst fucking thing. I didn't say fuck though, because I never would say fuck. It's just the worst fucking thing that high schooler. Anyway, I knew all of this was going to be harder on those who remembered a before. I remember a before, you remember a before. Anyone over the age of 18 has a solidified memory of a before. When I was teaching middle school this year, I don't think that many of my students had this sense of before and after the way I have a sense of before and after, or the way you have a sense of before and after. So they might be okay. We just need to help them figure out how to survive in this new iteration of America, and maybe not just survive, but God willing, prosper. And so I would apologize, maybe too effusively, to my seniors because it was my fault. I did not start COVID. For the record, that's one thing I can lay off my conscience. I did not have anything to do with the start and spread of COVID. I have been a hand-washing, mask-wearing son of a bitch since this whole mess all started. Seriously, I have been. So I'd apologize to my students about the fact that they were living through this, because they were living through it and they did have a sense of before and after. And that's the hardest one. Like babies that are being born this year, they're being born into their now. This is their before, this is their life, is their reality. They'll never have a grief over a different way of hopefully not. Who the fuck knows what's going to happen in this basket case country in the next couple of years. But sometimes adults around me would say, well, World War One, or not World War One even. Sometimes they would say that, but like World War II, or the Depression, or the Dust Bowl, or Vietnam. And I get that those were horrible, or the first fucking play. I'm so tired of hearing about 1918. It's not 1918. I'm tired of people equivocating. I'm fucking tired of people equivocating. Can we just accept that we are all grieving magnificently? all of us who had a solidified, concrete understanding of a before, this before 2020. And let's have mercy on the kids who don't, and do our best to fucking set them up so that they can survive in whatever we're leaving behind for them. And maybe while we're alive, we can work on leaving behind things that are healthy and objectively good, and raise up the human spirit instead of shredding it and trouncing on it like most of our current American machines do. I'm talking about healthcare, I'm talking about education now, I'm talking about divorce lawyers. Let's not equivocate. Let's just all accept we're all suffering right now. Different things, yes, but we're all suffering. Am I suffering as I sit here in the hotel by the highway? If I am thinking compassionately, is no worse than your situation sitting at home. Well, maybe it is worse. It is worse. Let's just admit, being a cancer patient, homeless, going through a divorce, it's pretty bad, folks. I'm not gonna lie. Like, I'm worn the fuck out. I can't wait to get to Chicago and do the Back Home Baller thing. It's a sketch on SNL. Look it up, Back Home Ballers. And that's what I'm going to do for like 2 weeks at my parents' before I move into my apartment. And I'm going to try to relish those 2 weeks. Because I'm suffering and I need healing. And I think one way we all heal is through community and through connections.